Welcome to the Financial Coaches Podcast, where we talk about how to build your practice from startup to scale up while being the kind of coach your clients crave. Finally, a podcast for financial coaches. Here are your hosts, Maria Casillas and Cody Sizemore.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Financial Coaches Podcast. I'm Maria Casillas, joined here by my incredible co-host, Cody Sizemore. We are excited to continue the conversation that we so accidentally started for you last week. But before we do that, I want to just thank each and every one of you for joining us today. We are in the thick of the holiday season, and I know that you have a bajillion things that you're trying to work on. And so the very fact that you tuned in today is incredible. And we just want to thank you. We see you. We appreciate you. And we're so glad to deliver some value for you today. Cody, I want to jump into our conversation as kind of a continuation of last week. Now, this could be a totally separate topic, but it just goes really well as kind of a cap on what we talked about last week. So if you did not listen last week, we totally get it. I think it was only about a 25 minute episode. We encourage you to hit pause here, go back and listen to that. This is a standalone episode. You'll totally understand what we're talking about, but there was some really good stuff in that last one. So we encourage you to do that. When we talked last week, Cody, you were saying that you had some perspective change in your business. And I have a feeling that I know exactly what you're talking about, but our listeners probably do not. So for their sake, could you just give us a little recap about kind of like what it was that you shared with me and how you got to realize that this was a shift in perspective for you?
Yeah. So, anyone who's been listening to this show for an extended period of time probably knows a little bit about me in the sense that I am a very driven person, and I'm always looking for like some form of like growth or reaching the next level. And this can be with like, the coaching practice. It could be with, my own finances. It could be with my real estate endeavors. It could be with my health. I mean, it could be with a lot of things, right?
Mm-hmm. Not just could be, it is all of those things.
Right. Like,
Yep.
Those of you who've been listening for a long time know that I do crazy things, like marathons and these like 75 hard things and stuff like that. Right.
Yeah. The rucking, I think the rucking marathon was one of my, of the, it was like the peak, the pinnacle of, he's crazy.
That was tough.
Like I've always known he's a bit nuts, but man, that boy's crazy. That was the peak of that for me.
Tough. It took about 9 months for my toe to heal from that.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. So if you don't know what we're talking about, I don't even know where to send you for that. But there's an entire episode about rucking a marathon or something like that. Anyway, I encourage you to go find it. It's kind of funny. But just suffice it to say, Cody's crazy, and he when he says that he. He always looks for growth. He absolutely means it, and he walks the walk. So go on, Cody. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that is me, and that's still me. But probably about, I would say 4 months ago or so ish, I had to have some sort of perspective change because I was just doing so much, and it's not even just like with the coaching practice. Like I was working a lot, because, I have a lot of clients and, that takes some time. And then there's all the back end work too of, marketing to get more clients and, doing like the post work for the clients and all this kinds of stuff. Right. So, I was working a lot, but on top of that, there's another area of my life that's really, really important to me, which is my faith as well. So, I'm very involved with my church. I'm an elder at the church. I'm on the worship team at the church. I was on the prayer team at the church. I was on the student night at the church. So, I was spending a lot of time just volunteering, doing those kinds of things. And then, my family is important to me as well. My health is important to me. So, I'm just pulled in a lot of directions. And because of that, it took up a lot of my time. And, that kind of structure was fine. And, I was doing it and I felt decent with it. But, from time to time, I got tired. I got kind of worn down. I go through periods where I've definitely felt just kind of like a little bit burnt out from time to time. And when that happens, it of course, affects like your mood and stuff like that.
So just to clarify here, what you're saying is you're human?
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
Correct.
Here I thought you had a cape and everything.
No. Yep. Yeah, I'm definitely human. So, but it got to a point to where there was one evening that I was like definitely feeling stressed. I was definitely feeling, burnt out, worried about certain things, not meeting goals, not meeting benchmarks, whatever it might be. And I kind of confided into my wife a little bit about it. And in the past, she was always like, very supportive and just telling me like, you just need to keep pushing, believe yourself. Like, I believe in you, all that kinds of stuff. But she took a different approach with me this time, to where she actually kind of called me out. And she was like, yeah, you are stressed. And yeah, you are really busy. And you are spread thin. And I notice it. I haven't talked to, our daughter about it directly, but I notice that she notices it as well. And maybe something needs to change. So I was like kind of taken aback by that, because that was like the first time that she ever kind of like took that approach. And I was like, okay. So we had like a really long conversation on the couch. It was probably like an hour long kind of conversation about like why I have these goals, why I want to do these things, all this kinds of stuff. And basically I came up with my own realization that in efforts of me trying to chase this like ultimate lifestyle, or, quality of life, or, the things that I want for my family, which, as we've talked about this before, is really just like to free up my time so that I can spend more time with them and my aging parents and stuff like that. The very thing that I was going after is actually what I've been kind of sacrificing in order to get there as well. And she didn't say that to me. I realized that throughout the conversation as we were talking, right? So she was kind of coaching me in a sense, kind of thing. And when I had that realization, I was like, that's not good. That's not what I want. This right here, right now, is not what I want. In fact, it's the opposite of what I want. So I decided that I'm going to enter a new kind of like phase of life. And I call it like my unloading phase. So what I decided to do, and this was something that I kind of agreed with my wife about as well, is I said, hey, this 5-year plan that I have for, like acquiring rental properties and, freeing up that time so I could essentially, quote unquote, retire. Now I would still work, but it would be work. I would work because like I want to, and B, not feel like I have to, kind of thing. And the feel like I have to is a really big part of this, right? So that was a 5-year plan, and I said, well, let's just extend it to be a 10-year plan instead. Let's double the amount of time. And with that, that also came hand in hand with, hey, if you're going to be kind of slowing down the business in the sense of, I'm going to make Wednesdays and Friday evenings family time instead of being in the office, late at night, 5 days a week. It would be maybe 2 or 3 days a week kind of thing. So with less hours of operation means less potential time to work with clients, which then just means working with less clients, which then also means generating a little bit less income as well. So, I kind of offloaded on that perspective. But then I also kind of looked at, my involvement at the church, and I said, with all the areas that I volunteer on, I'm probably spending, 30 to 40 hours a month at the church, just being there, and volunteering my time and, not really getting anything monetarily out of it. It's very much just spiritual. But it also takes away from the family time as well. So I decided I'm in 4 of these areas. I'm going to offload and I'm going to just bring it down to 2. So, instead of doing the elder, the worship team, the student night, and the prayer team, I'm just going to do the elder because that's a leadership position and that's really important to me. And then the worship team because that's a passion of mine. So I, took a step back from the student night, took a step back from the prayer team, and that freed up more of my time as well. And ever since doing that, I look at my books, my business books for this year. And, I had a goal of increasing it from the year prior, and to hit, multiple six figures. And I'm looking at it now, and even with the scale back from about, halfway through the year, I'm going to be hitting right around where I was last year. So it's kind of just like stagnation from 2023 to 2024. But in my mind, to have that same sort of like end result as far as like revenue goes for the business, but I'm putting less time into it, that is actually an improvement in my mind. Now, my mind, I also look at it and I'm like, well, the numbers stay the same. So there's always that part of me that's like, well, I'm not growing. But at the same time, there is growth there because I'm putting less time into it as well. And I wrestled with this idea in this perspective at first for like the first month, maybe 6 weeks, something like that. It really, really took a toll on me mentally because I had to like willingly tell myself like, hey, you're going to slow down. You're going to slow down. But then after that initial period, I felt a lot better. A lot better. And I've shown up a lot better for myself, for my wife, for my kids, for the church, for my clients, everyone. And I think that that's important on how we measure that success. Because when I was measuring the success before, it was just about data and, like how much I'm bringing in, how many people I'm helping, how many properties I have, how many things I'm doing with my time for volunteering. That was how I measured it. But now I have that kind of sense towards like, yes, you can measure it with data, but there's also that other side of it that's more emotional that you can't necessarily like measure with like a spreadsheet or anything like that, but more so it's a feeling. And I think that that's really important as we kind of go into this next year, because we did an episode last year about goal setting and stuff like that. And, that was very like just data driven. And if you're looking for that this year, go back and listen to it. It's still out there. So you can scroll down, you can search, whatever. But if you're kind of feeling the same way to where you're feeling like, maybe I need to reevaluate my priorities or my values, then I think that this is a conversation that might be beneficial to you as you step into the new year as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that as I hear you speaking, obviously the way we measure success was kind of jumping into my head as well. And then you kind of capped it with that. So I don't want to repeat that too much, but I do think that that is super important to look at. How are we measuring success? I think it's especially important because we oftentimes, and you just described this, have competing values. We have competing desires. Yep. And so when you are pulled in different directions, it's because those things are competing. One of the things you mentioned that made me smile, I didn't jump in, was when you said, when I retire, I'm going to work because I want to. And you said, and right. That was really important to you to say, because I want to. And the reason I smiled is because I know you. And I know that if you've got that desire to always, you use the word grow. And so that's the word I'm going to use is grow. And what you mean by grow when you say that is data driven. It is one upping or 10xing or 2xing, whatever your measurement is of the year, that time from before. And so knowing that those two things are there for you, I'm smiling because I'm like, oh, he's always going to want to work. Like he's always going to want to overwork, because if he sets that goal of being something to 2x something from before, rather than looking at, like you said, the emotional side of things, then it's always going to be there and you'll always be stressed. So I really appreciate that you were able to slow down it does not surprise me one iota that it was the woman in your life who helped you slow down and see some of the emotional side of that, because we women are just typically more emotionally driven than men are. Men are definitely more data driven, and that's one of the beautiful differences between us. So I think it's great. But what I also think is interesting is that you mentioned the word emotional and that it can't be measured. But it absolutely can be measured. And here's where it's measured. It's not just in a feeling that we have. It can be measured in the way that you interact with the people around you. So you mentioned that, your wife was recognizing this, that she didn't talk to your daughter about it, but she knows, like she can see with her own eyes that it is affecting the way that your daughter is viewing what you're doing. And so I'm just going to venture to say that those actually are measurements that we can use. Now, they might be a little bit, subjective, I suppose. They're not super objective, but they are still measurements. And so you were able to see that. And maybe we just need to ourselves and help our clients be aware of some of those more subjective measurements of, how things are going.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. There is one thing that you said about, the language that I used around wanting to work. And I want to make sure that I clear that up, because I want to work now, and I will want to work in the future as well. I want to help these people because I really love helping these people. It's a really big passion for me. But I think that the big one for me is feeling like I have to work. And that's what I'm really trying to, I guess you could say, get away from, I guess. I don't know if get away from is the right phrase, but it's the feeling of like, I don't want to have to be feeling like I need to perform in order to provide for my family. I just want the things that I have provided for my family to then provide for my family, kind of thing. And when I have a consultation with the client, even if it's a small part of me thinking, oh, I really need this client right here, right now, kind of thing. I don't want that.
So you don't want to have to be paid to work.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before, like, there's always going to be value to the client to invest into being paid. So like, I'll always be paid, but I don't want to feel like I need to be paid.
That's right.
Kind of
That's right. And that's, yes. And so, I just, as we are clarifying this out and hashing it out a little bit, I don't think you should do it for nothing. You're absolutely correct. But we're getting to the underlying issue, what's really going, what you actually want. It's not that you want to not have to work, because you're always going to want to work. You enjoy that. What you're really wanting is to not have to be paid to work, so that when you are paid, it's bonus, it's extra, it's it's good for you and for the client. It produces a good, but it removes that pressure that you mentioned. It removes that elephant in the room between you and a client. And it removes maybe some of that icky feeling that you have when you're like, oh, it removes the desperation from what you're doing. And so that's what you're seeking, is you don't want to have to feel desperate for clients. You want to be able to do this because you love it.
Right.
And then get paid for it on top of it.
Right. And even now, like, there's not like a quote unquote desperation, but there's definitely like I really, really want this kind of thing, and if I'm able to remove that, not only is it going to be better for me and like my own spiritual health, my mental health, it's also going to be better for my family as well. But it's also going to be way better for the clients as well. Like if I'm not worried about that, or if I'm not like pressed about that, even on a subconscious level, it's going to be felt when I'm working with these clients, or when I'm on this, consultation call with these potential clients as well. That's going to be felt. So it's going to benefit everyone, kind of thing. And that's what I really do want. And that kind of goes back to the conversation we had last week, which is like, what do you really want? I say I want time freedom, but But I think that what I really want is to be able to, leverage that time in the sense that I can make the impact the way that I really, really desire to make the impact on all levels, for myself, for my family, and for the clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And when we have some of those that are competing, it is important for us to figure out kind of what those are and for us to measure that in a way that is going to be productive for us. So back to the idea that we were talking about last week about kind of setting goals and that kind of thing. And we mentioned this could kind of be like a part 2 of that. I want to make sure that we are knowing what is important to us. And I think what I like most about the story that you shared earlier, Cody, is that there was this recognition for you that, yes, it is important for you to, I always say one up, but I don't really mean that, but to improve data wise, like what you did on years past. But you also said that's not as important to me as the relationships that I'm having with my family. And if I can do both at the same time, then I will continue to do both at the same time. It's not saying that we need to choose one over the other. Mm-hmm. There was a time when you could do both at the same time. And then one of those things got away from you and you were able to then recalibrate because misalignment happens often. Like it's what happens to us. We can be going clipping about just fine. And then all of a sudden we hit something and we're like, oh, we throw out the back and now there's a misalignment. So what you're doing is you're recognizing there's a little bit of pain there, whether it's you, your family, or in this case, both who feel that pain. And so you just said, well, I know what is more important to me. And so I'm willing to let go of some of this other stuff. And so as you guys are figuring out over the next, few days, what is your next year going to look like? We encourage you not to just set resolutions because like we said before, those kind of just go by the wayside, but really, really focus on who are you becoming as a person? Who are you becoming as a coach? And how do you shift that? How do you align yourself to make that actually start to come to fruition for yourself over the course of the next year, 2 years, 3 years? This doesn't have to be a 1 year thing. And in order to do that, first, you have to know what is most important to you. So I applaud you, Cody, for recognizing that and for being able to say with confidence, this was hard for me. Like it took me a little bit to be okay with it, and that's true if anyone's ever been to a chiropractor and, you throw your back out and you go back to the chiropractor and they quote unquote fix you. For the first couple weeks, maybe a couple days, depending on how bad that was, it hurts more, right? Like it hurts worse than when you went in the first place. You're like, whoa, this guy was supposed to help me. And so I think it's important for people to realize it might sting a little bit in the beginning when you choose the thing that's most important for you. So as we're starting to wrap this up, I'm curious, could you share, what do you think helped you most transitioning from that sense of, this was really hard for that first couple weeks to just kind of being at peace with the whole thing?
So, there has been one single word that has shown up in my life so many times in the sense that like, it's really, really hard to ignore it. Mm-hmm. And that word is just surrender. So, I'm going to get a little preachy. If you're not into that, sorry, I am. So, but that word surrender has come up for me in so many instances and in so many areas of my life as well, because I feel that like, while I'm very driven to have this quality of life or to, meet these benchmarks that I've kind of like created for myself and stuff like that, what comes with that is also a sense of like, I need to stay in control. Mm-hmm. Everything, is on me. It's up to me. I have to do it kind of thing. And really just like laying that down and just saying like, hey, like I'm going to surrender it. I'm going to surrender this. What's going to happen is going to happen, and it's because it's supposed to happen. That's the thing that has helped me the most. And was that challenging? Yes. Is it still challenging? Yes. Mm-hmm. But that is the thing that has been, the thing that I've kind of gone back to and just reminded myself and leaned on more and more and more. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. But that is the one thing for sure. It's just learning how to surrender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so cool because you and I did not talk about this prior to hitting record. And so I wasn't sure what you were going to say. But that word has been one of the things that comes up for me a lot this last year too. And the word that pairs with it a lot is trust. And, in order to fully surrender, I have to work on being able to trust that God's will for my life is it. I have to try to align my will to his will, but also trust that that is what it is. Like it's good. And even if it's painful at times, if it's not understood by me at times, that there are things that, I maybe wouldn't have done. I'm not the creator, so it's okay to say I trust. And then, like you said, to absolutely surrender. And I mean, I'm thrilled to hear you say that it's gotten a little easier for you. It is still something that I struggle with on a daily basis. Struggle is probably not the right word, but I'm aware of it on a daily basis because it is something that I have to conscientiously do oftentimes daily. So I'm just thrilled to hear you say that that's one of the things that helped you with that. I'd also like to clarify real quick that surrendering doesn't mean taking your hands off and not doing anything. It does not mean lack of action. Okay. See? Yeah. So all these things I guess need to be said since we didn't talk about it ahead of time.
Yeah. And I also think that, so you bring that up and I was just about to say that, but the point that I was going to make with that is that that's probably why it's so hard for us all the time to continue to do that, because there is that, while you do surrender it, that doesn't mean that you just throw your feet up and do nothing. Like there's always going to be a part of it that, to get to this, amazing recipe, like you have to throw in your own ingredients as well. And it's a joint effort versus, all on you or all on him. It's a joint effort. And that's why it's probably so difficult to fully surrender and why we always kind of struggle with it. It's something that, it's just like discipline. It's just like consistency. It's a perishable skill. If you don't practice it frequently, then you're going to lose it and you're going to struggle with it. And that's probably why.
Yeah, well said. And I think one thing that helps me distinguish that is that I'm not surrendering the process, I'm surrendering the outcome. So that we're able to still work in cooperation. We need to be able to do that. We need to have our hands in it. But you mentioned the word control earlier. And I think that that's what keeps people so stuck on that, is that we feel like, well, we know better, like we can be in control. And just to lighten the mood a little bit, I'll tell you, like when I'm a passenger in a car, I have a lot harder time surrendering because it's not just that I'm not in control, because I recognize, even when I'm driving in a car, I recognize that I can control what I'm doing, but I still know I can't control other people around me. But I also am a lot more aware of the stuff around me. So I know that my foot is hovering over the brake, for example. When I'm the passenger and we're, barreling towards the car in front of us, perhaps my husband's foot is hovering over the brake, but I don't know that. I'm not looking. And so I get a little bit more nervous about that. And I think that's where we just realize, okay, if we just surrender the outcome, like we just give that to God and say, you know what? I'm not able to know what this is going to be, but I can trust that it's going to be either good or that you will make it good. And that's what I have to do on a regular basis. So thank you for sharing that was the thing that really helped you. And recognize that, if you're listening to this and you're like, well, they just, went to church today. I know we don't do that very often. But there is a sense of being able to surrender, just even to, I don't know. I have a hard time speaking about outside of the context of faith, quite honestly. So I won't even try with that. But I do know a lot of people who just go, you know what? I need to continue to do the work, but recognize that I cannot always control the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Well, alrighty, guys. Thanks for the 30 minutes of your time. Hopefully you step into this new year. I know that this was released, a couple days before 2025, but hopefully you kind of step into this new year with a different perspective, whether it be one that you are going to be pushing a little bit more, and that's something that serves you and your own goals and also your quality of life. Great. But if it is another one to where it's like, hey, you've been pushing you've been pushing, and you've also kind of recognized that some things have turned out a little bit differently than what you initially had hoped. Just hearing this perspective and just understanding that it's okay to take a little bit of a step back for the sake of taking a step forward is a good thing. So let it sink in, let it process. And if you ever want to connect with myself, Maria, whoever, a really good place to do that would be our Facebook group. You can jump in there. It's called the Financial Coaches Community by New Money Habits. So, hop in there, add us as friends, maybe make a post, introduce us or introduce yourself, tell us what you got going on, and we can definitely support you. And maybe we'll even talk about some things that you have going on this podcast as well. So with that being said, we are definitely wishing you the best in 2025. And we know that you're going to be crushing it in every way possible for everything that you're wanting. So take care. Go get after it.
And we've appreciated you joining us in 2024. You guys have a great rest of your evening, your afternoon, whatever it is that you're doing, your week, your year. We will see you next week, next year for another episode of the Financial Coaches Podcast. Till then, bye-bye, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Coaches Podcast, brought to you by New Money Habits and Sizemore Financial Coaching. Submit your questions to our hosts by emailing podcast@newmoneyhabits.com. Be sure to subscribe to be notified of future episodes and join our growing group of like-minded coaches on Facebook. And until next time, happy coaching.